They were hired blades, not heroes. A patchwork of Greek hoplites and light troops gathered by a Persian prince to fight his own brother for the empire's throne. Some came for pay, others for glory, and, well, a few because their patrons told them to go. They marched east from Sardis in 401 BCE under banners that were not their own, confident in the spear wall that had humbled kings from the Aegean to Egypt. None imagined that within months their employer would be dead, their officers murdered, and their survival resting on a desperate conviction. If they could keep marching together, they might find their way home. The Greeks would later remember them with a term both simple and mythic, the 10,000, and their retreat through enemy lands would become one of antiquity's great epics. The disaster began in Persian palace intrigue. Cyrus the Younger, satrap of Lydia, and favoured by certain Greek cities, coveted the throne of his elder brother, Artaxerxes II, money he had in abundance and, soldiers he could buy. He enlisted Greek mercenaries through a web of recruiters, Clearchus the Spartan, Proxenus of Boeotia, Menon of Thessaly, and others from across Greece. Among them was Xenophon, an Athenian who, after consulting Socrates and the oracle at Delphi, joined not as an officer but as a volunteer. He would later give their ordeal its voice. Cyrus claimed he was leading a campaign against hill tribes. The truth emerged only as the army moved toward Mesopotamia. 10,000 hoplites, thousands of peltasts and archers, camp followers, muleteers, and a Persian corps of cavalry. Every mile carried them deeper into the great king's lands. The wide, flat horizons of Mesopotamia were unlike anything most had seen. They were far from home, and honestly growing farther still. The decisive clash came on the plain of Cunaxa near Babylon. Artaxerxes had assembled a huge force of cavalry, infantry, and scythed chariots. The Greeks stood on the right wing and charged with disciplined precision, routing the Persian left. But in the center, Cyrus saw his brother and charged recklessly. In the melee, Cyrus was killed. His head and hand severed. The rebellion died with him. The Greeks, unaware of his death, stood victorious on their wing. But when the truth spread, the cold reality set in. The man who could pay them was gone, and the man who would not pay them sat on the throne. Several hundred miles from the sea, surrounded by hostile cities and rivers, they faced annihilation. Yet they did not dissolve. Instead, they negotiated with the satrap Tissaphernes, who promised safe passage. For weeks they marched under uneasy truce, Persian troops shadowing them. Then treachery struck. Clearchus and other senior officers were invited to a meeting and murdered. Leaderless, the army wavered on the edge of collapse. At this moment, Xenophon stepped forward, urging them to elect new commanders and march for the sea. Cyrus the Spartan was chosen as overall leader, Xenophon among the generals. Their new goal was simple: reach the Greek colonies on the Black Sea. Between them and the sea lay mountains, rivers, and hostile peoples. Crossing the greater Zab River under constant missile fire taught them the need for adaptability. They recruited Rhodian slingers who outranged Persian archers, paired with Cretan bowmen to drive off skirmishers. In open terrain, the phalanx dominated, but in narrow passes it broke into columns, protected by peltasts and javelin throwers. Soon they entered the land of the Carduchians, fierce mountaineers who had never submitted to Persia and, had no reason to welcome strangers. Their ridges and ravines were perfect for ambush. The Greeks learned to seize high ground before moving, to advance in leaps, and to guard the rear with stubborn determination. Some days they advanced only a few miles, and nights were bitter and wind-scoured. Winter struck as they reached the Armenian plateau. Rivers froze, snow blinded, and hunger bit deep. Tiribezus, a Persian commander, shadowed their march, hoping the cold would kill them. They built huts from fresh-cut timber, rotated sentries to prevent frostbite, and foraged constantly. When tribes would not sell food, they took it by force. Discipline and unity were their only defense against the elements. At times, ingenuity saved them. They formed human chains to cross raging rivers, climbed cliffs under cover of night to capture fortified villages, and formed hollow squares with the baggage in the centre when threatened. Courts-martial punished theft from the common store, and leaders shared in the worst hardships. Xenophon gave speeches to keep morale high, while Cheirisophus enforced Spartan discipline. At last, on the mountain called Thetches, the scouts' cry rang out, "Thalata, Thalata, the sea, the sea!" Men who had not wept when comrades fell embraced and shouted until their throats were raw. The Black Sea meant Greek cities, ships, and, well, the hope of return. They descended to Trapezus, where the locals welcomed them. But, safety bred new problems. Some soldiers turned to looting, others hired themselves to local rulers, and quarrels broke out. Cheirisophus died, and the army fragmented into smaller forces, with some staying on the coast and others following Xenophon. Eventually, word came that Sparta needed soldiers for its war against Persia's western satrapies. The 10,000 joined the Spartan general Tibron, turning from survivors into allies of Greece's new masters. Ironically, men once hired to place a Persian on the throne now fought to weaken the empire. Xenophon's Anabasis, really immortalized their journey. The 10,000 were far from perfect. They plundered, argued, and even frightened civilians. But they showed us that discipline, leadership, and a clear goal could turn disaster into survival. They adapted their tactics to the terrain, combined heavy infantry with missile troops, and interestingly maintained political assemblies even in the midst of crisis. They proved that Persia, which had long been seen as this untouchable giant, actually had its vulnerabilities. The human moments, well, they truly stand out. A soldier cutting cloth from his cloak for a comrade's bandages, shared rituals before a dangerous march, and those heartfelt promises to the gods if they ever returned home. On the ridge above the Black Sea, their shout was more than just relief. It was really the creed of all survivors. Somewhere beyond the cold horizon is safety, and if you just keep moving, you can reach it. The 10,000's march, you see, reshaped Greek views of the Persian Empire. They had walked right through its heart and lived to tell the tale. Future Greek leaders, from Agesilaus of Sparta to Alexander the Great, would one day follow in their footsteps. Yet the enduring legacy is not just military, it's a lesson in resilience. Against treachery, winter, and the might of an empire, they just kept marching. And sometimes that is enough.